So good evening, or good morning, or good afternoon, depending on wherever you might be. It is the evening here in the UK. I'm still, of course, in County Durham, and would like to read a short poem tonight from my collection Exploring Rights, which was just published last month. I've been reading a few poems from that volume and also read a new poem recently called COVID-19. I'm hoping to actually share poems from my first two books, so I won't read everything from Exploring Rights. And as I've explained before, some of the poems in this volume are actually not appropriate for reading, not because they're offensive, whatever that means, although there are some very strident poems in this book, but simply because some of them you can't actually read aloud, like the title poem, which I've shown before, which is a heavily, as you can see, marked up and edited text. So that really is a poem for the page. And part of me also particularly enjoys poems. I think fundamentally a poem is for the page, at least certain kinds of poetry maybe. Because there are wonderful performances that happen in slam poetry and in poets reading poems that are also suitable for book publication and ways of sharing poetry. And I'm certainly looking forward to reading more of them. But I also think, Helen Wendler has argued that a poem is a little bit like a musical score, and I think there's a lot of truth in that. That the text, a bit like the notes of a musical piece, are there, and there's little instruction sometimes from a composer as to how it might be interpreted. Less so usually with poems. There are no marks that tell you about dynamics or anything like that. But I mean, it is a useful analogy because the text remains the same, but how someone reads a poem, what particular emphasis he or she gives to sounds and parts of that poem, does make it a performance. So without further ado, the poem I want to read tonight is called Unconscious Competence. It takes its name, I suppose, from 4 stages of assumption of a skill. So, of course, if you're not aware, you're not competent in something, it doesn't matter. That is unconscious incompetence. And the example in this poem is of a child just playing with paint and a sort of canvas without being aware of painting. And then if you want to acquire a skill, you might go through that stage of conscious incompetence where things are just not working and you're not quite sure why. Then as you begin to acquire it, there is that thrill of conscious competence that you are assuming, beginning to familiarize yourself with the skill that you're absorbing. I've recently been a nurse to my father, and I'm learning how to do things with bandages and treatments and all sorts of things. And after a few times of doing that, you get that slight satisfaction of conscious competence. And then just finally, I mean, obviously the final stage is unconscious competence. And there's something beautiful about that as well, particularly if my phone will behave and not fall down, which has been threatening to do. So I don't quite have unconscious competence when it comes to doing little videos. So yeah, I'm going to read the poem. I'm just going to try and prop up my phone. It's just me, there isn't a full production team here. So this is called Unconscious Competence, and it's not the same skill. It's 4 different examples of people at different stages of whatever skill they're trying to acquire. I'm not sure poetry is one of them. It's not mentioned here. So the poem is called Unconscious Competence. Unconscious incompetence. That the sail is a little large, false arc, or how she slops the paint without touching half the canvas, holds a brush up to the light and laughs. Conscious incompetence. In the organ loft, his feet slid and clipped the pedals. His ankles lacked that chemical rhythm. His hands, injured pipes, an organ might play. Conscious competence. So the bat fell in line. He glimpsed, half sensing the seam. The ball cut. The bat sprang suddenly from his pad. After, the willow sound was clean. Unconscious competence. She pivoted, and in one stride turned off the burner, coaxed servings of scallops and prawns into hazy bowls. Then, fox-like, nosed her way to table.